Welcome to the Therapist HQ, your weekly pep talk for private practice pros. Let's dive in.
Hello, and welcome back to the Therapist HQ podcast. My name is Alicia Murray, and as always, I am so glad that you're here and spending this time with me. I am so sorry that there was no episode last week. I record these episodes basically in real time, which is not a great habit to have, but I am very much on like the done is better than perfect mentality with a lot of things in my life lately. And one thing about when I started my podcast last year and then dropped off very quickly, I think was because I was trying to do too much. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that, right? Like if we're going to do something, we have to do it perfectly. And everybody here knows that I am like the queen of systems. Like I love a system. I utilize systems. And so starting my podcast was very similar in that I was like, okay, I have to have all these episodes banked. I have to be recording 2, 3, or 4 weeks in advance. And I quickly dropped off because it became just, I had too much going on, right? Like I had too much going on. I didn't have enough time. I didn't have enough time to bank all of these episodes. And it fell off for a long while. And since I revived it this year, I told myself, like, if all you can do is record in real time week to week, then that's what we're going to do. And we will cross the bridge of, not being able to do a week when it comes. And last week was that week for me because I woke up, I believe on Sunday, and started losing my voice. Monday came around, it was worse. Tuesday came around, it was slightly better, but not great. Wednesday came around, which is the day that I usually record. And I was like, there is no chance. And even if there is a chance, I'm really going to like wreck what is left of my voice by trying to do this podcast today. Luckily or unluckily, depending which way you look at it, I didn't have any sponsors for last week's episode. So I didn't have really any like contractual obligations to record. And so I didn't. And you might be wondering, Alicia, why are you boring us with these logistical details? And I just think there's a little bit of a lesson in there in that like, it's okay to drop a ball sometimes, right? Like, and nothing detrimental happened. Of course, I didn't like breach a contract or anything. Would I love to consistently have my weekly episodes out? Absolutely. But some of my favorite big podcasters I follow are taking holidays off and taking weeks off in the summer and taking weeks off around the holidays. And so I really try to hold myself at like a reasonable standard, right? And I hope that all of you out there are doing the same. So with that being said, that was my week last week, was parenting and working with no voice. So you can just imagine how that went. For me. Although my children were actively looking for it, I'm sure you can imagine they did not turn up with it. They could not find my voice, but it did return eventually, as you can hear. So that is all good news. Okay, moving into the episode today. So I had an idea. I was going to address the summer slump today because it had been on my radar, and I usually always do like a lot of content around summer slumps and just, what to do with your time. But if you're like, yes, I'd love to talk about this, you might have to wait another week. I'm so sorry. Because this past week, I hosted a free webinar called Leaving Insurance Without Taking Your Practice. I had well over 300 people registered. I had over 100 people that attended live. It was honestly, I'm so thankful. It was so cool. It was so great to chat about. I feel like that's one of those topics that I could just talk about forever. And so having that hour to do so with people who were so grateful and thankful to have that information was a really cool experience. So thank you if you're listening to this and also attended that. But something that came up in there that I thought to myself today that I wanted to talk more about here was out of network utilization and like being an out of network provider. Because what I learned through the questions that I received both in the webinar and after the webinar via like email and Instagram DM is that I think therapists are still not as well informed as they could be when it comes to out of network. And I may be biased on this because my whole group practice is fully out of network, fully private pay, and it's a group practice or a fully virtual group practice. And that is the way that we've been operating for a couple of years. And I can see in my numbers, like how much that helps with our retention and how much that helps with our conversion compared to if we were just private pay or just offered super bills. Because we do complementary out of network billing in my practice, which we will get into. So through the questions that I was receiving and even through the content that I was sharing and having people say like, oh my gosh, this is like the first time I've ever learned this, I was like, I should do like a podcast episode about this. Like I should really talk about this more if this is going to be helpful for some people. So today I wanted to do like a big old deep dive into all things out of network, like what that means for you as a therapist, what that means for your practice, for your billing procedures. And I want to be totally transparent with you guys. I always go into podcasts with like a outline of what I want to talk about to keep me on track. And if you're listening to this, you are blessed to have an episode without an outline because I just came up with this topic today. So we are just going to kick it with each other and talk about out of network and talk about it in an easy and accessible way. And hopefully, you can take something from this that will help you to streamline out of network in your practice or make it easier for your clients to utilize out of network in your practice, or just give you the ability to take in more referrals and put yourself in front of the right people who are able to pay and receive reimbursement and retain themselves as a client that way. So let's get into it. So, out of network 101. The first thing that I want to start with is the two different ways that you could be an out of network provider. The first is providing super bills, and the second is doing courtesy billing. If you are providing super bills, this is a very hands-off way to be an out-of-network provider. Providing super bills is essentially, I like to explain super bills to my clients as fancy therapy receipts because that usually sums it up for them. Like they can't use the receipt that they receive for like running their credit or debit or HSA card, but it's like a very fancy therapy receipt. And most EHRs will generate this for you. Everyone knows I use Jane for my EHR. I love Jane. And Jane automatically populates a super bill after every single appointment. After you run a payment, it's like 1 or 2 extra clicks to email the super bill to the client. Once the client receives the super bill, they then have to submit that super bill to their insurance company. And in today's day and age, many insurance companies utilize online portals or even email to submit those super bills, which is really cool because back in the day, those had to be faxed or snail mailed. So many clients can look into their specific insurance plan. A lot of them are using apps and portals now to submit those. So the EHR will email the super bill to the client, and then the client will submit that super bill to their insurance company. I always recommend if clients are going that route to not get more than a month behind in submitting the super bills. If they want to submit them once a month, that's totally fine. I just would really suggest not going much further than that, just because administratively, like for the client, if something starts to get kicked back or if reimbursement stops, it just becomes a little harder to like track what went wrong and like how much they have to rectify. So that is the super bill end of being an out of network provider. Like I said, for the clinician, very low lift. Like all you are truly doing is just sending the super bill, and then the client holds the rest of the responsibility from there. The other end of being an out of network provider is doing complementary billing, which is something that my practice takes on. So, what this means is you are not in network with the insurance company, but you are able to submit these out of network claims in a very similar way that you would submit an in network claim. There are 2 boxes when you're submitting the claims that you want to make sure are checked a little bit differently than when you are submitting in network. The first one is that you want to make sure that you're not accepting assignment. So this means that you are not accepting the assignment of being in network, right? So you want to make sure that they know that you are an out of network provider. And so the reimbursement changes a little bit from there. The other box that you want to leave blank is the one about remitting payment, because you do not want the payment to come to you. The legal and ethical thing to do with out of network is to make sure the reimbursement checks are going directly to the client. So like I said, very similar to submitting an in-network claim after you run your client's payment. So you have your client session, you run their payment, and then you go through and submit the claim, very similar to how you would for an in-network claim, but it is as an out-of-network provider. And you submit it to the insurance, and then the client receives their reimbursement check from there. The thing about doing complementary billing is that it is a bit more admin on the practice, right? So now the practice is taking on not only submitting the claim, but with submitting the claim, the practice also has to have the insurance information of the client stored. So our process when doing so is when we have a new client joining the practice, our biller reaches out to grab all the information they need. So, the copy of the insurance cards, the copy of the driver's license, the date of birth of the policy holder, all of these random things that you have to input on the front end when they first start so that it's smooth sailing from there to submit these sessions every single time after. So, that's one sort of administrative, I wouldn't even call it a burden, but just like an extra step, right? And then the next thing that you are going to have to do is if problems arise when you're doing complementary billing, I do think it's best practice for the practice to help to the best of their ability if a problem arises. So, what this means in practice with us is we tell clients right up front if you randomly stop receiving reimbursement checks, or if you get funny looking mail or a funny looking email in regards to your reimbursement for therapy services, you have to send it to us. Like you have to send it our way because we have no way of knowing if anything is going awry, right? Like we are not in network, we are not paneled or contracted with the insurance company. So the client does have a responsibility and onus on them of if they notice that they're not receiving reimbursement checks, or if they did get a funny letter in the mail and they don't really know what it's saying, to just send it over to us, via email or in their client portal so that we can take a look at it. I will say that I managed the out of network for my practice initially, and it hit all of my mental and emotional capacities pretty quickly. So I did bring on a biller to help me with this. I am also utilizing her for other things as well. But the out of network stuff was a big one for me because it is a group practice. So there's a higher volume of claims, which means that potentially there could be a higher volume of things that also have to be rectified. And I just wanted an expert to be rectifying it, right? Because I was learning as I went in terms of rectifying, different things that different companies needed on the claims and resubmitting them a certain way and having certain things on them. And it was just beyond my scope of knowledge. And frankly, it just wasn't knowledge that I wanted to have. Like, I have so much other knowledge and expertise in so many other areas of both being a therapist and running a business. And this just wasn't something I was interested in taking on. And I had the resources with the group practice to hire this out. Of course, it is an added expense. And as much as I would love to have the extra money in my pocket or being able to, use it other ways, like this is what works. And this really is what was needed for me to make this system work. I absolutely do think it's possible, especially for solo clinicians, to take on this complementary billing on their own, just because it is a lower volume. And if you have a really solid EHR that you're using, it makes the submittal quite easy. So that is the bulk of like the logistics of being an out of network provider as a therapist. What I realized in the training is that there is a lot of knowledge that goes a little bit behind that it felt like therapists were missing that could be really helpful. And one of the things that I found was the initial startup of taking on clients and what that looked like in terms of explaining out of network benefits and helping them to tap into them from the start. So this is where my bread and butter of systems comes in, right? So something that we went over in the webinar that I want to share today is what your client experiences as soon as they begin working with you, or even before they even reach out to work with you, and how you can systemize that to help them to understand and utilize these out of network benefits. So I used my website as an example. So under my fees and payment section of my website, I have a benefits checker that's embedded right into my website. So as they're scrolling through, they're learning about our private pay model. We have sliding scale spots. They are learning that we could submit super bills on their behalf. And then I also mentioned the complementary billing, what that is, what that looks like, and what the process for that is. In the midst of that, I have this insurance checker, like I said, embedded right on the website. So as they're scrolling, they can enter in their name, their date of birth, and their insurance information and get a real-time update on what their benefits are. So this will include what their deductible is, how much of it they've already hit, and what the reimbursement percentage would look like for the therapy sessions. So, right there on the fees and payment page, they can get a pretty good estimate. It's never exact. It's very hard to have an exact number, and insurance does it that way on purpose, but they can have a pretty good idea of what it is going to look like in terms of payment using their out of network benefits. So if your session fee is 200, but they are going to be reimbursed 75% of their session, they're really looking at just $50 out of pocket, which is a huge difference from $200. And oh my gosh, please, did I do that math right? Yeah. So that is a huge difference, right? When a client is looking at this therapist who they feel like is such a good fit for them and they're really excited to work for. And now all of a sudden, the accessibility just shot through the roof because even though there is a delay in that payment, the client now has the choice and autonomy to pick a therapist that they truly feel like would help and benefit them and not just be forced to a list of therapists that may not even specialize in what they need. They don't really have a lot of choice. Now they have the choice and the accessibility, right? So that's one way that I think our systems help in the conversion. And of course, right underneath the widget, you can probably already guess what I have. I have a button for them to schedule because after they run their payment and they see, or I'm sorry, once they run their insurance and they see what the reimbursement would look like, I want to strike while the iron's hot. And if they feel like the reimbursement is going to be a good rate, they don't have a very high deductible, this is actually going to work for them, I want them to have the ability to get on one of my therapist's schedule ASAP. So I have that schedule now button nested right underneath the insurance checker. Also on that page, I am not done yet because if they want to utilize super bills, I have a section under just explaining what super bills are with all of the information that they would need when they make the call to their insurance company. Because I found early on when I was just providing super bills that clients would come back to me before they started or after their first couple sessions and say like, "Hey, they're wondering like what your NPI number is and they're wondering what the session code is and like I'm not getting a good idea of what the reimbursement will be because like they need all this information." And this is like a foreign language to clients, right? Like they don't know what an NPI number is. They don't know what a session code is. And so I have a list of all these fancy numbers and codes and things on our website that's like, hey, when you make a call to your insurance company, these are the things they might ask. And so this is the information that you're going to need. Although I have a group practice, I just use my personal NPI as the NPI for folks to check for their insurance. I don't care. I'm the owner. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't bother me if they're using my NPI to check against those things. Everyone that works for me is an LMHC as well. So it would be the same meat and potatoes at the end of the day. So I think that also is helpful in terms of conversion because it just helps to break that barrier to entry, right? Like if our client is instructed to go call their insurance and see what their out of network benefits are, and they get met with, well, actually, you need this additional information. How many clients do you think will actually circle back and get that information? Or are they going to kind of throw the towel in and move on to like the next thing they have to solve or the next task that they have to do? And something else that I talked about in the webinar is to think about your onboarding systems and all of the things you have in place when scheduling a new client or working with a new client and doing it in a way that you would want to be done to you if you were starting a service. So if you think back to the last service that you scheduled for yourself or started, were there barriers to entry? Like, were you hoping that you could schedule online? Were you hoping that you could pay your bill online? Were you hoping to be able to talk to somebody a little bit sooner? Like, were you hoping to add on an additional service and like didn't see that as an option, or you wanted a better explanation of the different types of services that you were able to choose between? I want you to use those experiences, and this goes far beyond out of network stuff, but I want you to use those experiences when designing the experience that your client is going to encounter. I think that can go for a lot of different parts of our process. But I think especially with out of network, when this is something that is so unfamiliar to so many people, including clinicians, including the clients who hold this insurance and are choosing these insurance plans, right? And I have gotten to a point with many clients in our practice where they're comfortable enough to send me or send our biller the options for the renewal of their insurance plans and saying, like, hey, I don't know what this means. Like, can you let me know which plan is best to choose to continue to see someone out of network and have the best out of network benefits? And like, we are always happy to do so, especially my biller, because like I said, like this is what she knows and does. And so that is a task that takes less than a minute. Like she can look over those plans and know the terminology, know what it is saying, and know right away what the best bang for their buck is going to be to try to keep their premiums low, but also try to optimize the out of network benefits. And so little services and like acts of service like that go such a long way when cultivating the relationships with the clients in your practice or the clients coming into your practice. And if you don't have a biller on staff, or if you're not comfortable yet utilizing like a third party company like Mentaya, like Thrizer, then you have to just become comfortable and confident and assured to have those conversations on your own. And I think the first step is to truly understand out of network through and through, because people know when we're trying to explain things that we don't actually know, right? Like I'm sure you've had the experience of listening to somebody explain something and being like, this person's full of shit. Like this person does not know what they are talking about. We do not want to be that person. Like we want to be sure that we can appropriately and adequately share just what these benefits are and how helpful they can be. So, my takeaway from that part is first and foremost to decide what system is attainable for you to incorporate out of network into your practice. Is it super bills for right now? Like, if super bills are the only thing that you feel like administratively you could handle, that is totally fine. I would add in that section on your website of what clients may need to call their insurance company and check their benefits. I would include a thorough explanation in layman's terms of what it means to utilize a super bill and what that could mean for them in terms of reimbursement and in terms of what that looks like financially for them as they continue therapy. And I would be sure that you can also explain it during your consult calls or during your initial sessions with folks to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And if you come across a question when talking about out of network, don't be afraid to say, I'm not really sure, but I'm going to look into this for you. Like, I'm not really sure, but why don't you call your insurance company? Because that sounds actually like something that they would answer. Like, it's okay to not know it all, but I do want to make sure that you're putting in a little bit of effort to learn this part of the billing procedures and of your clients' insurance benefits, that you are able to at least show up in some kind of meaningful way in that area, right? If you are able and willing to provide complimentary out of network billing, the same kind of thing goes. Like, I would highly recommend getting some kind of benefits checker on your website. I think it really helps with conversion. It really helps with striking while the iron's hot and having the client and their information in front of you. I use Mentaya. I can include a discount code in the show notes for a free month of their benefits checker. I believe it is $39 or $29. $29 a month from there. I love it. I love getting notified when clients put in their insurance information and being able to follow up with them. You also can submit claims directly through Mentaya, and they will help you to rectify claims. Like, they could kind of act like that intermediary biller where maybe we don't have the resources to bring on a full-fledged biller into our practice at the moment. But these companies like Mentaya, like Thrizer, can help to sort of bridge that gap for us and to provide a little bit of assistance for no cost to the therapist. The cost actually comes out of the client's claim submission. So, like I said, I think determining your bandwidth of what you are able and willing to do in this moment in your practice in terms of out of network benefits is really, really important. Whether you are currently private pay, or maybe you are looking to transition into being fully private pay, or maybe you're just looking for like a higher retention rate among your private pay. Like, maybe you're noticing like, oh, people don't really stick around past like 6 or 8 months. And is that because clinically, we're providing the short term work that they need? Or Could it be that like there actually was more to work on clinically, but they just kind of dropped off? And maybe finances could be a part of that. Maybe it could be scheduling, maybe it could just be life. But I think in today's economy, like the finances could be a very real piece of that and a piece that we can proactively address. And I think is really great to be able to proactively address that, right? So we're going to establish what we are able to do, establish what resources we're going to use. Are we going to hire a biller? Are we going to use a third party? Are we going to take it on ourselves and learn as we go and see what we are capable of doing? There is no right or wrong answer. I think that part's also really important. Just because the practice down the street from you or the practice that your friend owns is doing things a certain way, the system is going to work for you if it's a system built for you. So you need to be sure that you are creating the system that is going to work the best for you and where you are at right now in your practice. I also want to include like a couple fun facts that I included in the webinar about out of network and just like random tidbits that I've learned along the way. The first is that when you submit out of network claims, sometimes the company will come back and ask you to fill out a W 9, and you should not be alarmed by this. I know that a lot of people are feeling jaded by insurance companies. They're feeling taken advantage of. They're feeling like they like pull the rug out from underneath them. I can assure you that filling out a W 9 in order to submit an out of network claim is nothing abnormal. It's not like a gotcha moment. It's a very common admin thing that insurance companies do for newer clinicians or clinicians that haven't billed out of network through them before. So that's first and foremost. Do not be alarmed. My second fun fact is that adjustment disorders on their own do not get reimbursed for out of network benefits. I have never come across, I guess I should say I have not come across a plan that will reimburse for an adjustment disorder because you do still need a diagnosis code for out of network claims, just as you would for in network. So if a client does have an adjustment disorder, you are going to have to diagnose them with a secondary diagnosis in order for them to have the claim processed. And of course, I would have that conversation with a client, let them know what your clinical interpretation is and why it's necessary to include that clinical interpretation, even if maybe it wasn't like pertinent to the treatment that you're doing or isn't as prevalent as you think. This is something that is required if they want to receive reimbursement. Above all, I hope that this was helpful. I hope that this was a nice little crash course in all things out of network 101, so that if maybe you are on the fence about using it in your practice, or maybe you are using it in your practice, but feel like you're not tapping into it to the best of your ability, or you can take away some systems that maybe you can improve to make it a smoother experience for you or your clients. That is my hope. And I hope that you got that today. I usually end the episode with Therapist in the Threads, where I find a Reddit thread talking about what we talked about today. And I have to be so honest with you, they were so uninspiring. And I am not here to waste our time on uninspiring Reddit threads. And I thought about doing one that was like out of pocket or unrelated, but I was like, I'm going to stick to like the brand. I'm going to stick to what we do. And there was nothing exciting. There was nothing fun. There was nothing new. If you search up like out of network for therapists, you're just going to find a lot of discourse about different platforms that people are using. Like I said, like the Mentayas and the Thrizers. You're going to find a lot of discourse about deductibles and how to explain this to clients. And, we already went through all that. So we are covered. Anyways, thank you so much for spending this time with me. Take care of yourselves, take care of your practice. Very important little side note, if you are listening to this in real time, that means that you have 1 or 2 more days left to take advantage of my huge sale that I have going on right now of my marketing course. Find your niche, fill your practice. The course is marked down $150, bringing it down to $147. And you are also going to receive 3 months free inside my community, which brings it to almost a $400 savings. This marketing course is perfect to do during the summer slump, if you will, because it's going to help you to really nail your niche and your messaging, and then to figure out what marketing you want to do from there. I go through all the avenues of marketing. I go through email marketing, social media marketing, networking, website, blogging, SEO, Google My Business, so many things. And the point of it is not to have you to do it all. The point of that is to educate you on these different avenues of marketing and help you to find what you like and what you're good at and what you can do consistently. Because in in marketing, consistency wins always. So I will include the link to that in the show notes. That sale is only good until Friday at midnight. So Friday, June 26th at midnight is when that sale is good until. There are a couple other ways that I can support you beyond this podcast. If you are in the early stage of private practice, like thinking about launching or just getting your practice off the ground, the Complete Launch Kit was built for exactly where you are. It's a step-by-step course. It has 65 lessons covering everything from forming your LLC, setting your rates, building your marketing foundation, and seeing your first client. Everything is in one place for you in the right order with me alongside you. If you're already in your practice, but your marketing is feeling inconsistent, or maybe you are looking to scale beyond the marketing course that's on sale, the HQ community is definitely for you. It is my done for you marketing system for private practice therapists. And every week you're going to get a social media prompt, blog post prompts, so you always know what to post. There's also a library of expert trainings, or I can personally review your website and directory audits and send you feedback. And my favorite part, you get access to your own AI sidekick, which is built specifically for your private practice marketing, like your specific practice, your specific specialty, your specific niche, and all of that is only $37 a month. If today's episode was helpful, I would really love and appreciate if you would leave a comment, hit subscribe, share this with a therapist friend who maybe also needs a weekly private practice pep talk. It really is one of the best ways to get back to the podcast, get this podcast seen by more people, and just get it into the hands of therapists that actually need it. So, with that, take care of yourselves and your business, and I will see you next